Hello, boxing fans around the world. Thanks for joining us once again. Another episode featuring Christian from the Friday night panel on Talkin Fight, and we're going to be talking the Olympics, specifically boxing. What do you got for us today, Christian? Always a surprise to me, anyway.
Well, like everyone else, it's a surprise to me as well because I get up and I start scanning headlines in the mornings for boxing news, amateur boxing news, Olympic news, and the like. So we talked a little bit yesterday about how our friends in the UK right now got the chance to get back, to lace up and get back into the gym, into the boxing gyms starting this week after, theoretically a fairly successful lockdown period where they're starting to see cases of COVID-19 start to wane, so they're able to get people back out. That is not the case here in Toronto, as you know, because both of us are here in the city. However, police and local bylaw enforcement were nowhere in sight as the owners of a Mississauga boxing gym defied provincial orders by opening their fitness facility yesterday afternoon. So speaking to the Toronto Star newspaper, Teresa Heron, a co-owner of Huff Gym, said that there were no efforts made by police or Mississauga bylaw enforcement to block the advertised reopening of the boxing gym located approximately around Dundas and Cawthra Road. She confirmed about 6 people were at the time working out in the gym after they opened at 4 p.m., adding that there was capacity to fit another 14 people in there. Heron made the argument that gyms should be deemed as essential because people needed to exercise to combat stress, anxiety, and depression, which, have shown to be on the increase during the pandemic, saying, I don't think our government has done a very good job at encouraging people to take their vitamins, get outside and exercise, as well as keeping their bodies strong and healthy. She urged bylaw enforcement and police to, quote, please work with us. So the entire province of Ontario was pushed into an emergency brake shutdown for at least 4 weeks, starting back on the 3rd of April, after officials warned of a third wave was imminent and the province risked deeper lockdowns and an increase in cases of COVID-19. So currently, indoor and outdoor public events and gatherings are prohibited. This is including patios, which had recently reopened. Many of you will remember just back on Good Friday, I did a segment here from a patio just because it was the last day that we were going to be allowed to be out there, but currently closed like everything else. Personal care services and gyms were ordered to remain closed. Heron said, though she accepts that the virus is a real threat, she doesn't, quote, believe the data they're reporting, and she believes that they are fear-mongering. Now, that being said, Ontario reported another 3,670 cases of COVID-19 and 15 deaths on Tuesday morning. Locally, there was about 1,16 new cases in Toronto, another 613 in Peel, 519 in York regions, 214 in Ottawa, and another 196 cases in Durham. So, Graham, they're playing a bit of a dangerous game here that may end up costing the city one of its boxing gyms. Now, whether or not you believe that, gyms should be opened or closed, whether or not you believe that gyms are spreaders, sources of community spread for the virus, whatever side of that you fall on, if bylaw enforcement goes after these guys, which eventually they will, these guys could be facing tens of thousands of dollars in fines daily. Under the current guidelines, penalties for an individual breaking the rules under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act include fines as high as $100,000 and a prison term of up to a year. A business that breaks those rules can be fined up to $10 million Canadian. Now, a business that's a first-time offender is unlikely to see a maximum penalty, but even a fine of a few $1,000s is something, many small businesses can ill afford at the best of times, let alone right now. So, my advice, the weather's changing. If you like your local boxing gym and you want to be able to return to it once things begin to return to normal, like our friends in the UK got to do this week, there are plenty of ways to train outdoors. And that would be my recommendation is get outside, get those vitamins into you, get that vitamin D from sunshine, and take your training out to the pavement until things change. Swinging around the world, though, and checking in on our friends down under in Oceania, New Zealand has started administering COVID-19 vaccinations to all athletes ahead of their departure for the Tokyo Games. New Zealand's Olympic Committee Chief Executive Karen Smith told reporters in Auckland saying, "We're really satisfied that the government was able to put us in that category of, quote, national significance." So that's now underway, and athletes have been worked through according to when they might be departing for Japan. Some are still qualifying, some still have events and activities to prepare for. So over the next few months, we will see that gradually rolling out. More than 200 athletes are expected to represent New Zealand at the July 23rd to August 8th Games. The New Zealand government said last month that it would allow athletes to jump the queue in the country's vaccination rollout in order to allow them to participate in events of national significance. I'm not sure how exactly they're qualifying things as national significance. So who's going to be allowed to jump that queue versus who isn't, but that is something that they're working on down there. New Zealand has been one of the most successful countries at containing the virus and started the second round of its vaccine rollout for border and quarantine workers last month. Now, this is in contrast to, even countries like Japan, where we're seeing they've just started last week, the first phase of their rollout. The Australians are also hoping to have all of their athletes vaccinated in time for the games, though the national rollout in Australia has been hit by some pretty major roadblocks with restrictions of the AstraZeneca vaccination specifically. The Australian Olympic Committee, the AOC chief, Matt Carroll, said that the AOC was, quote, pretty confident that all Australian athletes would be vaccinated before Tokyo, saying that we're talking about a cohort of athletes and officials of around 1,400 people. So it's not a huge number, but it is very important. Also gives you an idea of the size of the Olympic contingent. I'm talking a couple hundred from New Zealand, 1,400 from Australia. Give you a population density and size of their Olympic programs for those who aren't necessarily well-versed in what's happening down under. Wednesday, as we all know here, as today, marks the 100 days until the opening ceremonies in Tokyo. And as such, a number of New Zealand athletes assembled in central Auckland for a photo shoot with a bus-sized skateboard. The New Zealand team will tour the country with the supersized skateboard in order to drum up interest for the games, where skateboarding will be making its Olympic debut. Smith was quoted on that saying, today's Olympic Games are more extreme and more urban and youth-focused. And events such as skateboarding being included, the board will be traveling around New Zealand, represents this. This year, we really need to support the support of all New Zealanders, and that's why the skateboard will be traveling the country as we ask all Kiwis to get on board. Those of you looking to see who we should be looking out for in New Zealand, great boxer coming out of there, David Nika, who's twice the Commonwealth Games champion, is set to make his Olympic debut, and he will thus become the first male New Zealand boxer to compete at the Olympics since Athens 2004. The 25-year-old from the Hamilton area earned his Olympic spot after finishing as the runner-up in last year's Asia-Oceania Games Olympic qualifier tournament in Jordan's capital of Amman. Nike is currently seated second at the Olympic Games tournament and his heavyweight division, and recently made his pro debut, in which he won by technical knockout after just 29 seconds in the first round. So keep an eye out for David Nika in the upcoming tournament at the Tokyo Olympics. But those are the headlines from around the globe today, Graham. We're having some questionable things happening in our backyard as far as boxing gyms goes, but athletes getting vaccinated in the run-up to the games. And I'm sure we're going to see more National Olympic Committee starting to do a focused rollout. Hopefully, we're not going to see anything where we're seeing vaccinations being taken away from high-risk groups in order to hand them to athletes. In Australia and New Zealand, they have been much more fortunate when it comes to containing the virus. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they are islands in the South Pacific. So it's a lot easier to shut down an island than it is something like, the Canada-US border, for example. But happy that they have had such success with their own, and happy that their athletes are not taking away from high-risk groups, but they are going to be able to be vaccinated prior to their arrival in Tokyo. So good news on that front.
Yesterday, we touched briefly on Fraser Clark, a British boxer, speaking of the Commonwealth Games. And so I had a quick poke online just to see what he was up to. I didn't realize he was actually a former sparring partner of Anthony Joshua. So, Fraser Clark from across the pond is quite the boxer and has quite a chance of a medal over at the Olympics. So anyway, I hadn't been up
Well,
to speed.
absolutely, and I know it's got to be, frustrating for some of our friends in the UK. You know, we're always talking about Southeast Asia and places like that right now, and a lot of that, again, I mentioned this yesterday, has to do with the fact that those cards have been decided already, and that there's just still a lot up in the air when it comes to both the Americas tournament as well as the European qualifiers as to who's going to be there.
Yes.
And that's Carl over at Last Bell Boxing, who had mentioned Fred initially, is chiming in to let us know that he knows his stuff. And
He
anyone
does.
who questions whether or not he knows his stuff is welcome to go check out Last Bell Boxing chat as well.
Absolutely.
And you can argue with Carl over on that channel.
Awesome. Thanks very much for the update today, Christian. Appreciate it. Too bad about our rebels here in our own backyard, but boxers being boxers are who they are. So if you have no other news, if Last Bell has no other news, if Big T has no other news, I guess we'll bid adieu and see you tomorrow.
We'll talk then.
Thanks very much, Christian.